All right. What a joy to have a conversation with you.
Well, thanks, Carol. I'm really looking forward to it. I have to say that
You
I
know,
wasn't, but I am. So
well, I know that talking about yourself, if
that
it's
is a
not something
challenge.
that you do all the
No,
time, can be
no,
nerve-wracking, right?
right, right. That's not exactly my modus operandi. That's exactly right.
Well, tell
Yeah,
me what you thought, first of all, when you got this as a gift.
I thought here she goes again because she gave me what the one is where you can write out your life. And every month I'd get a reminder, use this line and write about it. And I would feel guilty every month, and I never did it. And so then the next thing I know, 2 years later, she gives me this gift. And I thought, well, I can't let her down the second time. So anyway, um,
Well, I suppose that one of the questions I have, given that little bit of your story, is
yes.
what do you think it is about her, what she thinks of you, that makes you
Oh,
have a story to tell?
oh my goodness. Barbie and I have known each other since her children were enrolled at Rossman School. And through that, and then, I mean, parents are friends, but semi-friends when they're part of your student body. And I was the head of the
Yeah.
school, did admissions at that time. And so it wasn't until actually after I retired, which was in 2003, that I got wind that Barbie's parents were both sick with cancer, and
Mm,
she was nursing them through that. And I got in touch with her because I knew her parents, and they'd been very kind and generous to the school. And so I just wanted to let her know that my heart was with her and I was praying for her. And any way I could support her, please to let me know. Well, through that, we became very close friends and we communicated regularly via email, but then we started also communicating in person. And Barbie was a person of faith, but not really faith, and in terms of a deep faith. And so
mhm.
we started going to church together. I said, will you come to church
Oh,
with me? And anyway, so through that, she became a new understanding of what a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ would be. And so because of that, our friendship grew and grew and grew. And her parents both passed away that same year that we started a friendship. And then it's just gone on since then. That would have been 2004, I guess. So yes, and so we see each other regularly. We often have lunch once a week, except when I'm in Florida, and maybe twice a week. You never know. And so we stay in close touch. And so she respected what I did. Why did she do this? I think she knew that I was a faith-filled person and that I
yeah.
was a person she could trust. And so through that, and I know when my husband passed away, she made an entire book of his life. And then she just,
Oh,
well, I wasn't getting any younger. Maybe she should do the same thing for me. So she made an entire book of my life, including baby pictures and the whole schmear. And so I thought, well, good, we've satisfied everything. But then she does this, like, okay, so here we go. So
well,
that's a little bit about it. So she's just a very, very loving, close friend, and she has a lot of energy. She's quite a bit younger than I am. She could have been my daughter, but not quite. And so anyway, so that's a little bit about that.
well, this is certainly, I asked what made you think that she would want you to tell your story. And it is really about you. And in hearing you talk about just this little bit of impact from your time as head of school before you retired, tell me about the school itself and what made you want to go be a part of that institution in the first place.
Well, that was serendipitous. That was completely a God move because I knew the head of school because he had previously been at St. Louis Country Day, which is where my boys went to school. I should say our boys, but anyway, went to school. And so he had been the head of the lower school. And so when he moved out to Rossman, a year or so later, he got in touch with me because, of course, I'd been a volunteer at Country Day when they needed it and yada, yada. And so, yeah, he said, would you consider coming out here and teaching with the second grade class? And I said, oh, Fred, I'd be happy to come out and see Rossman School, but there is no way on God's green earth that I could be a teacher. And so I said, but let me come out and visit just because I would enjoy that. So I did that. And of course, he wanted me to take the job. And I just said, no, these people pay money to send their children here. No, that won't work. But if you ever want anybody to do admissions, I would love to do that. I had done the college admissions before that. And I loved that piece of it, of communicating with people about institutions that were very worthy. And so that's what happened. And then he called me and said, well, would you come on out here and be my secretary as well as do admissions? So the following year, that's what I did do. And then he had a health turn, and a year later, and it was pretty obvious he couldn't stay at the school. And then the people there, I actually contacted the president of the board, and I said, I'll be glad to kind of take over here to help the teachers get through the end of the year and kind of keep things in order. And anyway, and as a result of that, they ultimately that summer asked me to be the interim head of school. And so I was the interim head of school, and then they said, you have the right to apply, and which I did. And obviously, then I was blessed to be able to receive that job. So that was my journey into beginning my work at Ross.
Yes.
So
I so want to hear what you were thinking when you make that decision to actually apply, to go from assistant to interim, then to actually apply is
right.
clearly a big step of faith and of self-confidence.
Well,
What were you thinking
that's true.
in that moment?
What I was thinking is, God, is this really what you have for me? And why would you? I was raised in a fairly modest home, a very loving home, but very modest home. And I thought, this is such a contrast to my personal lifestyle. And then I thought, but I wouldn't stand in the way. And so what I would say is that if this is what God wanted, then this is where I was going to go. And then I felt so grateful for the opportunity. And my husband has always said to me, you're always volunteering. You're obviously a leader. Why don't you just take the job? And we were educating our boys in private schools. And he said, massive funds coming in. And so at any rate, quit volunteering and let's help with the home front. So that's kind of where it all began. So
How long were you there?
20 years.
Oh my God.
So 2 years. Yeah, 2 years missions, and then interim, and then 18 years as the head of school. So so at any rate, absolutely a fabulous regeneration.
I'm so sorry. It is
Pardon?
Safe to say that you shaped many lives, and not just the students,
yes.
but their parents and the staff and teachers as well.
That was the best privilege of all. And when I walked in the day that they said, you've been chosen as head of school, and the teachers were all clapping and so happy. And anyway, we just, a teacher can never be your close friend, but they can be a friend. And so you have to be careful relationally, but at the same time, they have to trust you. And they knew that I could trust them to be their best in the classroom. And I would take care of running the school and doing the admissions and bringing in the families that I thought would really complement the mission of the school and the dreams that the teachers had of how they could teach children and raise them up to be good people. And we, over the years, created a character education curriculum and followed that very closely, so that the children would be taught to be responsible, honest, kind, and just very, very genuine. And we still said a blessing at lunch every day. So, and it was a secular school. So I thanked God for all of those opportunities. And then we had several major capital campaigns and over the years changed the whole format of the school and increased the acreage from 3 acres to almost 20 acres. And
Oh my.
um, yeah, and then I made several major additions to the school physically. And so it was just a privilege and such good people. And what you learn and what you do is you take away your own misunderstanding. People could be very wealthy, but that doesn't mean they aren't totally good, wonderful people. And so developing those relationships, it's just really, it was a total joy in my life. And some of them are sustained to this day for sure. So I feel
Well,
thankful.
education has certainly changed a great deal. I'm sure
Yeah.
you saw change in the 20 years you were there.
I did. That's when computers were just coming in. But I left Carroll when it was getting to the point where it was going to be helicopter parents and the cell phones were coming in and all of that over attentiveness and not I wanted them to trust us to take care of their children. I didn't need for them to worry when their children were at school. And so some of that that was when I backed out. It was in 2003, and I would give every year a talk to the parent body at the opening of school, and it was called Back to School Night, and they'd rotate classrooms and all of those things, and visit with their teachers. But I would give an address before that, and the address I always tried to give them quote advice on parenting, and I can remember one of the last ones I was giving, and I said, I do remember saying that I feel sorry for you all. Sometimes when you go on vacation, you can't even be away from your work because people are calling you.
Mm.
And as I'm saying that, a phone rings in the auditorium. And I thought, well, if that isn't a prize example of interruption, but I said, you can't be it's so hard. And I feel sorry for people today. They cannot be away from their work and away from and we all think we're too self-important, and I'm guilty of it just like
Mm.
everybody else. And so I'm thinking my phone is so important. Let me get it. What somebody just texted me. I better check that. Well, can it wait 3 days? Probably just fine. And so I don't know. So I guess I would just say that yes, education has changed dramatically. And some of the standards that have changed in terms of who the educators can be and what they can be teaching in the classroom. I don't believe Rossman has, I would have to say, caved into that, but I don't really know that because I don't interfere in any way. But yes, life has changed very much for schools, and I really feel sad about the public schools. I grew up in the public schools and had a wonderful education. So, life goes on, but sometimes you just wonder, where's this life going? So,
Right. I
mhm.
certainly can remember my husband and I have two sons. They're in their 20s,
Uh-huh.
and I'm 62. And I can remember I got in trouble one time, and my
Oh,
mom came to school,
mhm. Right.
and I can remember having the clear sense that I was in trouble not only with the teacher but also with my mother.
Absolutely.
And I was very clear with my sons. I knew the teachers. I loved many of their teachers. There were some issues, certainly in middle school,
Mhm.
but I was very clear with them that they were supposed to be leaders in the class.
Right.
And if they misbehaved, other students would follow. So they needed to stand on the character we had sent them to school with. But I saw that change as because I have a sister-in-law who's a teacher, one of my dear
Mm.
friends is a principal, and to
Mhm.
hear them talk about it, it was changing even as I was raising our son. My husband and I were raising our sons. That
Yes.
yes,
Um,
parents were becoming very different in their approach to
mhm.
their child's education and to their child's character or lack thereof.
and lack thereof, and a sense of discipline and responsibility, all of those
Yes.
things. Yes, it's grieving.
Mm.
We just keep praying that God will straighten out this world and this wonderful country in which we live, and help us to kind of, I don't know. And then I always said I won't get old and say it was better then. But it's hard to get, it's hard to see what's happened with the inroads of technology. So
We can safely say it was different.
it was very different, and it was free. And I know no I know I have a twin sister, and her daughters her daughter had twin girls then. And those girls, when they were in high school, we wish we'd grown up when you did, because we had such amazing freedoms. I remember taking
Yeah.
the bus and the streetcar all the way to the ballpark in North St. Louis with a group of girls from, in seventh and eighth grade. And we'd have a ball, and we'd stand in line to get Stan Musial's autograph, and all of them, we'd follow every score and what have you, and thought it was so fabulous. But we were gone for a day or I mean, and our parents didn't even worry about it. And
No.
we were far from home and totally independent at the age of what, 14, I guess, at the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was,
They have no idea.
they don't, God bless them. I'm sad for that.
Me too. Me too. I love that story because I can remember we would tell this a similar story of getting up in the morning and leaving and then not coming back again. You're
Oh, for
playing, you're
sure.
going to the pool, you're all over at your friend's house and not coming
Yep.
back home again until good 3 or 4 o'clock.
Right, right.
Yes, and just hanging out. I love that so much. I love that. I want to talk about your faith because clearly that's woven in and out of everything we've already discussed. So it is
Oh,
clearly a part of who you are. I want to talk about your faith.
oh,
Um, tell me your faith journey, and we have
mhm.
we have plenty of time
Oh,
to hear about it.
oh. My faith began as an infant because I was born into a home of parents who went to church every Sunday, and they met each other at church. Were married in the church, a church in St. Louis City and Clifton Heights, a little Methodist church. And so from the beginning, our brother was 18 months older than we were. So we were all three taken to Sunday school every Sunday. And then we would sit in church with our parents after Sunday school. And in the Sunday school, we had the Mrs. Newcomb. They were single ladies, whom of course we thought were hugely old and have no idea. They were probably in their 40s or something.
Yeah.
But they, and I still can see the picture of Jesus, sitting on a pedestal over there. So you'd always knew that picture was there watching you as you were in your, Sunday school class. And we learned scripture. We learned how to look up scripture, how to memorize scripture. And then I always loved to sing, as did my sister and mother and daddy were in the church choir. If you go back in time, do you remember Stan Can?
I do. Yes.
Okay, well, he was the organist at our little church.
Oh my gosh.
I know this is a fun story for you, Carol. And of course, he was a Jewish man, and apparently he was just looking for how could I earn some money, and they offered him some money to help lead the choir, and I'm sure it was absolutely zero, nothing. But he went on, and he even played at my wedding. He came back every time. He came back to play at my sister's wedding, at my brother's wedding, and at my wedding. And just a precious man. So that just tells you a little bit about this sweet little church that had maybe 100 people in membership. And just another man in life that was very different, very funny, but very serious, and also very faithful as a human being to those he knew. So anyway, so it was that little church, and so we loved to sing. And of course, he was leading the choir, and our parents would sing in the choir, but then as we got older, they quit doing that. It got a little harder. We had moved to Webster Groves by then. And anyway, but we still went into church every Sunday. But then, in addition to learning all the scriptures there, Barbara and I remember singing a duet in that church, and just things like that you just treasure the memories, and kneeling for your when you therefore brain freeze, a communion, around the little semicircle, and kneeling for communion, and the pastor passing communion, and of course going there to be taught when it was time to be confirmed into the church. And in fact, in our service on Sunday, the pastor was talking, and this was a church in Kirkwood, was talking about God and fear. And I can still go back to remembering when that pastor at that time said to us, when you see the word fear, you think the word trust in the Bible. And you don't fear the Lord, you trust the Lord. And anyway, so, so just little tidbits of what God gave to us in that setting. And then as we got older, the mother and daddy said, we know we had, they're just such a small group of teenagers at the little church. They said, we'll drop you off at the Webster Presbyterian Church, and you three go to church and go to Sunday school and go to church, and then we'll go into Fry Memorial, and we'll come back and pick you up after church. So that's what we did through high school. So we had all those youth groups and all of the impact of those, wonderful, wonderful people and leaders. There was a man that was a cowboy. Gosh, I can't think of what his name was. But he was on TV, and we would watch him regularly on TV, like after school or whatever. And he was our Sunday school teacher, and he would have contests for us and say, okay, I want you to look up Matthew 15, and who can get it first? Well, of course, Barbara and I were just zoom, zoom, zoom. We've got it right now. So, and then we did all sorts of retreats. And so, faith was just a constant part of our lives. And many of our friends were of the same ilk. And as I learned about some of their parents now and realized their parents really weren't so strongly faith-filled, and they did, I never ceased to be grateful for what I was given.
Well, and you said that your parents met in church.
Yeah.
Tell me where you met your husband. I love a good love story.
Oh, well, that would be nice. I'm not sure how big a love story this is. I met my husband on a blind date. At that time, I was working for William Jewell College in admissions, and I was going to come home to St. Louis to Webster for the weekend, and my mother was speaking to one of her friends and said, "Oh, Kathy's coming in for the weekend," and she said, "Well, I have to tell Ann," and so she told Ann, her daughter, and Ann said, "I wonder if she'd want to go out with Chuck." And so anyway, so that was a blind date. And so I met him on a blind date, and he was, Chuck was about 9 years older than I, and he was working at First National Bank in St. Louis and was an assistant VP at that time. And anyway, and we had a very short courtship, and by end of May, I had moved home and thought it would take some classes at WashU because I was working on a counseling degree. I did that, and then I said, okay, that's enough. And he asked me to marry him the 1st of August, and that was that. I said, I just need 3 months to plan a wedding. So so it was fast. So we were married in November the 11th on Veterans Day of 1967. Yep.
Well, can I want you to tell your friend who bought this SoundStory for you that you and I have something in common, and that is that I met my husband on a blind date as well.
Oh,
do you love it? I love
it. And who set you up?
A friend of a mutual friend who I was living in Cape Girardeau at the time, and this is your story, not mine, but living in Cape Girardeau, and she knew that we were both 30 at the time,
Uh-huh.
and I had asked God 6 months earlier. Well, actually, I apologized. I said, Lord, I am sorry for trying to do this on my own, and I'm going to give this to you to
Oh,
find
God
to find a
bless you.
husband. And then
Right.
I met him 6 months later, and she
Oh,
said to me, he's a very nice man. He has a good job. I don't know what she told him. I never did ask her what she told
right,
him
right,
about me.
right,
But
right.
yeah,
Right.
we met, and it was instant for me. I was in love. We had like a 4 hour conversation after we had
Uh,
gone to the movies. I just, yeah. So we have that in
uh,
common. Don't you love
and
it?
I do love that. It's a very important piece of our realities. Exactly.
Absolutely. Well,
Right.
I'm trying to look at the time frame then that when you
So
graduated from William Jewell in
in
no.
65, in
So
65,
you then had open heart surgery.
I actually had it while I was at William Jewell. I mean, I had it in 62. I graduated from Webster High in 61. And then in the
Okay.
summer of July of 62, it had, I had a hole in my heart from birth. So that my heart was not functioning correctly, to say the least. And it was enlarged and anyway, without that, I wouldn't have a life today. And that's where you
Right.
turn to your parents and say, turn back at this point in time and say, how did you have the courage to do that? Because they only did 3 chest surgeries, they called them, at Barnes a week at
Oh,
that point in time. It was brand new to do heart or lung surgeries. And
right.
so at any rate, but it went beautifully. And I know the surgeon was called, well, Tom Burford. It was called Big Black Tom because, as I think probably most of them did at that time through the stress, they smoked constantly. And then I think he ultimately ended up dying of lung cancer. But
Oh my.
he was kind of a caustic person, and he just took his job very seriously. And anyway, yes, so that was in 1962, and then I went right back to college, and then finished college
Oh
just fine.
my.
Right, yeah,
Well,
finished college just fine.
well,
So,
I'm very curious too. Is that, first of all, rare surgery
mhm,
in the early 60s, and
right,
then you meet the love of your life on a blind date. Is
right.
Are you concerned that, can I have kids after open heart surgery? How healthy am I after open heart surgery? Do I tell him that I had open heart surgery?
I think, Carol, I'm just such an optimist that it never occurred to me I would
Um,
have children. So it just never occurred to me. And so and I guess at some point I told him, and actually at that point in time, Barnes was trying to quote advertise a little bit that they were doing this kind of work. And so they asked my parents if I would allow them to have a newspaper article about my surgery.
oh,
And of course, I can still remember the day my mother saying to me, honey, this is what they would like to do. And I said, Mother, you must be kidding. I don't want a bunch of publicity about this. Well, needless to say, she said, well, can you think of how you might help other people? And so anyway, so they did a whole, I don't know if you remember Parade magazine. It was part
I
of the
do.
a whole article. To this day, of course, I have that article, a whole article in the Post-Dispatch. It was a time Martin
Oh,
Luther King was coming to the forefront because he's also in that same publication that I have. And so anyway, and I remember Mr. Queenie of Queenie Tower fame came to visit me in the hospital, and he said, now what do you think of the food? And of course, this was after I'd had the surgery and everything was fine. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. They didn't rush to get you out of the hospital. And so at any rate, I said, well, actually, sometimes my mother will bring in a hamburger for me from the outside. And he says, well, young lady, do you have any idea how many meals we prepare a day here? I'm like, oh dear, I've just been reprimanded.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a
You're
like, oh,
wasting our good hospital food.
yes, 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 exactly. So anyway, so yeah, so it was a life-changing event, obviously, and
Right.
life-changing because I suddenly was back to having energy I mean, I was always an energetic person, so but then it was more steady and I didn't have to worry. They had kind of curtailed some of my activities at the end of high school. So anyway,
Even even in the early 60s, of course, women were going to college, but
right,
not a lot of women still were going to
that's
college.
that's
How
true.
daring. Yeah, talk about that.
Well, and neither of my parents went to college. Barbara and I were the first ones to graduate from college. And our dad actually he had to leave high school in order to help support his family. And then he was self-educated, went to work and on the loading dock at Lincoln Engineering Company and worked his way all the way up to being president. And so I um so I was very grateful for that. But we did have two cousins who had graduated from college. So those were the first role models we had in our family of going to college. And then I'll have to say that at Webster at that point in time, it was just assumed you would go to college.
Mm,
And I I guess I never thought otherwise. Now, my parents told me where I would go to college, and that was because of my heart. I wanted to go to Purdue University, and they wouldn't let me. Barbara did go to Purdue. Well, not that we wanted to go to the same school, but at any rate, she went to Purdue. I went to William Jewell College, which again, spiritual Baptist college,
right.
and
Yeah.
and we had uh, every week we had three. Where we had to report to the auditorium and they would take attendance. And it would be a whole service, like a church service 3 times a week. And yeah, and it was during those years that I rededicated myself to Jesus. Uh,
Mm.
so so yes, and I had a wonderful experience in college and I was president of the sorority and Barbara was president of her sorority at Purdue. So, and she was actually president of Webster Groves High School also. So, we were trained in leadership, I think, because of our parents' examples. And that's pretty well characterized our lives. So
I'm fascinated that you have a twin. I think everybody
mhm.
probably, loves the twins and triplets. And
Right,
so many of us as mothers have said, and fathers too, if I could, that we wanted to have twins, but of course,
right,
you can't plan that sort of
right,
thing. But what
right.
was it like growing up with a twin sister?
Oh, it was fabulous. You always have a playmate. And
Yes.
and we were both competitive, so we were competitive playmates. And then our poor brother, a year and a half older, he was like, "Oh my gosh!" So and he was not the achiever. He's been enormously successful in life, but that wasn't in him from the get-go. And so he had to put up with us being right behind him just 1 year in high school, and so yeah, so yes, it was just and is to this day an incredible blessing. And so we I'm having some health problems right now with my heart, and Barbara just and she lives in Oregon, so which is unfortunate, so she lives far away. But nevertheless, she's we communicate every day in some way, which we hadn't always, but she's just gets on edge right now and wants to make sure I'm a-okay. And so
Mhm.
so we always have, and her family, I'm very close to her family, and she has 3 children, and we had the 2 boys. And so yes, having a twin, obviously it was just a gift of gifts. And we were, always jump on our bikes together and go riding hither, thither, and yon. Anyway,
Mm.
yeah, just the best. And
Oh man.
our
Are you
patterns,
identical or?
we actually are. We didn't know that. Because of my heart condition, I was always quite a little skinny girl, and so And Barbara was a more normal person, and not that she was heavy, she wasn't at all, but nevertheless, it was pretty easy to tell us apart at that stage in time when we were younger. And but we decided that when Shannon, her daughter, had twins, that we would do one of those, I don't know, 1, 2, 3s or whatever the
Yeah,
process
23 and
was.
Me test.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something. So we decided when they were all coming down to our home on Sanibel. And so we said, well, let's do it, and then we'll open the results when we're all together. And we did, and we opened the results and found out we actually were identical. So, and until then, we've been told we were fraternal. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and I don't know if it goes back to the fact that I had the heart problem, she didn't. I have no idea why they always said we were fraternal, but we're not. So anyway,
I,
yeah.
I want to go back to your husband because I know you lost him 5 years ago. What
Mhm.
do when that blind date occurred, what was do you remember when you saw him, what you thought?
I remember thinking, this is a stable person. This is
Mm.
a nice looking person, and he works hard. He was already he had worked, I guess, he worked for the steel company. He'd worked for what was it called, the machine company. Anyway, and then he worked for the bank. So that was his third job, and each one was very interesting. And he was a real learner. I could tell that from the get-go. And for Chuck, it was always reading interesting things, and loved business, loved finding out how businesses worked, and loved finding out, well, if you're going to give a loan to a farmer, I can't wait to go out to see his farm and learn about all of his farming. And so and then later in life, he was always like that. He was always a good resource for information. And he started then to study art, and by the Missouri artist's art. And so I know so yes. So I mean, I think just from the get-go, I just respected, the fact that he was 9 years older. He was just steady and stable, and he was ready to be married also, and he wanted a family. So it was an easy decision for both of us. And he
And,
said,
and
go ahead.
go ahead. No, no, you go ahead.
Well, he said, well, I love you because number one, this really sounds terrible. Your parents live close in proximity to where I live. You have thin ankles, and your mother stocks a good refrigerator. Is that terrible?
No,
Oh
it is
my
not.
God,
Now, that second
terrible.
one means that he was checking you out, Kathy.
Oh, yes, that's true.
That's
That's
what that
true.
second one means. The
Yes.
first
Uh,
one is
yeah.
surprising
Uh-huh.
because we have this image that a lot of men do not want their mother-in-law very close.
Well, that's true. That is
So
true.
that's surprising and good.
That is good. That is good. I hadn't looked at it that way. I just thought it was maybe a little selfish, but it worked. And it was honest. So,
He was honest. He was honest. And then the third one, was he implying that either you guys would always be able to eat because your mother.
well, because he liked to come in, we'd go out for dinner, go out with friends or whatever. And we'd come in, and he would open the door and see what he could pick out of the refrigerator. I go, no, he would, whenever we went out, he'd eat the rest of my food. I mean, that was just, and so he was a man with a big appetite.
All right, tell your friend who bought this for you. There are now two things we have in common. We
Okay.
met our husbands on blind dates, and number two, our husbands eat our leftovers.
Exactly. Exactly. And one of my sons refuses to eat leftovers. Yeah, I think he had too much role modeling. So, oh my
Oh, that
God.
is oh, I love it. I love it. Tell me, Kathy, and this is not, not to be sad, but I know you're a woman of faith and you know where he is now, but what
Right.
do you miss? What do you miss about him?
I miss his presence. I miss I miss his intellectualism. I
Mm,
miss the way he, um, we made a lot of physical changes to the home we lived in. We bought his parents' home eventually, and
okay.
not eventually, but early in our marriage, actually. And his parents, we traded homes. His parents moved into our first little home, and we moved into his parents' home. And well, I mean, we bought the home from them. But
Mhm,
anyway, all of that is to say that he he went, well, in fact, when we made the move into that home, I said, there are only two things I request. And I said, I would love to live in your parents' home. It's a beautiful home, but I want a new kitchen and I absolutely need air conditioning.
mm.
So anyway, so from then on, he was someone who always looked as, and one of his banker friends said, that man loved every damn brick in that house, which would be a true statement. And but he was always looking at how he could make our home better, and did a lot of remodeling, put in a gorgeous family room with all cherry paneling in it, and obviously a brand new kitchen. And anyway, and over the years, and then a 3-car garage over the years. Anyway, and so he was very creative, and he was like a frustrated architect in some ways, because he knew, as he said, champagne appetite, and a
Oh,
but,
yeah.
and what,
Beer budget.
yeah, exactly. And so, but everything was done with hourly wages and things such as that. That was just always the way it worked. And so anyway, I think we've frozen again or something.
Oh, well, I'll keep talking. It
Okay.
could, yeah, I'll just keep on talking.
Okay.
Uh, I
So
think we're
anyway, so
good.
what do I miss about him is I miss his physical presence. I mean, but I really miss just knowing he was there, and
Mm,
the confidence of having him as my partner. And it's not easy to be alone, and it's not much fun on
yeah.
many occasions. And yeah, so, and it's not like he was because we could never spend extra money on tickets for this, that, or the other thing. He was a deep, deep saver, but that's why I have the life I have today. And
Mm,
so it goes back to that statement of the security that he gave me, and our family. He wanted the best wanted our boys to have something when he passed away and when I passed away. And so he was very focused on doing things for the people he loved. So
legacy.
yes, yes.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
did the two of you always want to have kids? Was that the plan
Yeah.
right away?
Well, we had one in 9 months. So yes, apparently we did.
Honeymoon baby, huh?
Yes, a honeymoon baby. That's exactly right. Yes. So we did, and we never questioned it. We did. And then we had our second son a couple years later, and both just fine young men. And
Mm,
have been a real joy, real joy in our lives and in my life. And in particular now, I'm very, very not dependent upon them, but um, we communicate fairly regularly. And
that's
one of them
wonderful.
lives here, and then in St. Louis, and he's an attorney. And the other one lives in South Bend, Indiana, and he's a professor of theology at Notre Dame. So
Oh, follow that journey of faith.
yes, right. Converted to Catholicism while he was on a Fulbright scholarship in Germany, studying under the world's leading theologian on Lutheranism. So go figure that one out.
Oh my
Raised,
gosh.
raised an
Oh,
evangelical Christian. So it all came in there. So he's a charismatic Catholic. So
oh my goodness.
very
Well, now three
faithful.
things we have in common. We're the mother of two boys.
Yeah, perfect. It's fun to
Well,
have two boys.
a- and I don't know if you, I was going to ask you that. I don't know if you reflected on that and if you ever thought, my husband said this just a couple of days ago, and I can't remember what happened, that he said, we never had a daughter. And he said,
Right.
we need a daughter. I'm like, we're in our 60s. We are not going to have that ship has sailed. Uh, but I loved, as you just said, I loved being the mother of boys. Didn't you?
Right.
You loved it. Why did you love it?
I just they're uncomplicated, truthfully. I mean,
Yeah.
and mine were always I remember one of the school teachers saying, "Why are your boys so quiet?" And I said, "Well, we don't really yell at each other at home. We don't need to speak real loudly to each other." I never thought of it until, I guess he said that, and I thought, well, I don't think that's a handicap. But at any rate, they yeah, and they would just run outside to play, and in an era where the kids could do that. They were, like we talked very early on, and we're in our visit about the freedom that they had, and the one son was probably more responsible than the other, and still is to this day, in his own way. And that would be my theologian son, is very, very detail oriented, which is important for the work he does. And my David is a little freer spirit, and God love him. And in the meantime, he is a superior conversationalist and
Mm.
much better than his mother is by a long shot. So at any rate, yeah. So I know and then they've each married. David John married at age 33. Chuck was 33. Or maybe John was 32. Anyway, Chuck was 33 when we got married, and then David was 43 when he got married. So they married late. So I don't know where your sons are in their journey, but
Single. There.
single, yes.
Yes. Someone asked me recently, Kathy, about grandkids. I've said, we don't even have girlfriends yet.
Right, yes, well,
Well, we
I
want to do
waited,
these things in order.
exactly. I waited a long time. I was 62 when my first grandchild was born, I guess, but I felt like I waited a long time. So at any rate,
Yeah.
they,
Well,
yes, so in terms of the boys, yep, they're definitely, I'm devoted to them, and they obviously have wives to whom I'm equally devoted, so I feel very
wonderful.
blessed by the women that they've chosen.
How has your faith helped you, especially losing your husband, but even as a mother and a wife, and my
Mhm.
goodness, leading a school? How has your
Right,
faith helped you all these years?
right. It helped me put perspective on things. Um, there were times at the school where there can be some very challenging situations, particularly relationally with parents who are, for their children, et cetera, and so forth. And so and of course, all of those are very confidential, but you're like, oh, I mean, I would come home and spend the weekend festering and worrying about it, and then thinking, release it to the Lord. You've done the best you can do, and you have to release this to the Lord. And,
Mm,
and, the gift to be able to, show the people of the school that I was a woman of faith, because that was, I guess, through my actions and my demeanor, that was very clear to them, and it was very acceptable and appreciated by them, even though it was a secular school. And then of course with Chuck's illness, he'd had a stroke, and it wasn't a severe stroke, but it was a significant stroke. And I guess it was 9 years later that I lost him. So caring for him in that time, which took a lot of patience and a lot of um, digging deep, Lord, what's intended here, and how are we going to handle this? And trying to make the best decisions when he can no longer care for the home, and I had to care for it. And then praying about, is it time to sell the house? And knowing that he wouldn't want to, and having to be really quite deceitful. That was
mm,
a low ebb for me, because that, and then the time that I had to put him in a care home, those are my two real low ebbs. One was, he always
mm,
said, I'll die in this house, that was always his statement. And when I knew that I just couldn't take care of the home anymore, it was, close to 100 years old. I just couldn't do that anymore. And so anyway, so making that decision, and then telling him we're going to put the house on the market, and making that decision and actually selling it. And it sold the first day, blessedly. And then I'd chosen a condominium that I knew he loved, because he'd driven over near Lamar Park. And we'd driven by these condominiums, over the years, and they were built in around 2008. And he, being a person who loved architecture, and we drove by the first time, and he said, "Oh my goodness, look at how beautiful those are." And they
Oh,
really do make a statement that's unusual. And I knew he liked that. And so when it was time to look for a place, I said to the realtor, "I want to look over there first." And that was an answer to prayer, because I looked at the condominium that I'm in right now, and I said, that's the one I'm going to want. It'd been on the market for a year. And she called me that afternoon and she said it sold this morning. And I said, "Well, all right, that's not what I wanted to hear, but you know what I want. And so let's keep
mhm.
looking." Well, 2 weeks later, she called me back and they backed out of the contract.
Ah,
And I said, so this was a God thing. It was meant to be for us. And so I knew that I was taking him to a place that he liked. That helped.
right.
And then when he got, and he was a pretty stubborn German, and he he had his own way about him, and he was physically a large man too. So there came a point where he wasn't walking so well, and it was harder for him to get around, and he was beginning to fall once in a while, and that was put me into a
Yeah,
very difficult place. So in that I couldn't do anything. I mean, I had, I'd have to call 911 or get somebody else to come over and help me. So at any rate, so that was when I had to ultimately choose. And one of the other reasons that I chose this particular location is because they were building a home right next door to it that,
ah,
excuse me, was going to be a care facility for memory care and regular care, and senior living care. And
mhm.
so then by that next fall, I had to make the decision to move him over there. And so, yeah, so those were really, excuse me, test your faith times, because I was ridden with guilt. And
Mm,
the boys understood, and they believed that it needed to happen because he had fallen a couple times when we were up at South
yeah,
Bend. But and they were worried he would fall on me, and then I would be in a pickle, and all of that. So,
yeah,
but overcoming that guilt, to this day, I harbor it and I give it back up again, So
yeah,
there are just points in your life that there are decisions you have to make that just can't be avoided, but it doesn't mean that they bring you any joy.
for sure. I was just reading I have this book, the Power of the uh,
Uh,
Praying for Adult Children,
oh, yes.
and the Stormy Armington's line of books, and one of the lines was that addressing guilt that we have as
Mhm.
parents, and this is true of the guilt we have as
Right.
spouses,
It
because
is. It's
my
exactly true.
yes.
Mhm.
And the one line that I want to share with you, that really got to me, was we must forgive ourselves, and if we need to ask for forgiveness, of course we should do that, because the enemy of our soul is going to try to eat away.
Keep
And it
eating
was that,
away at our spirit.
yes, it was that
Exactly.
phrase, the enemy of my soul.
That's
And
beautiful.
isn't that beautiful? I
It
mean, that's so
is,
beautiful.
because it's
Yes,
true. We were born sinners. We expect too much of ourselves, and we cannot be perfect all of the time, and we have to make painful choices as life goes on, whether it's with our
yeah,
children or whatever. I can remember with one of the boys doing a tough love season, and it was, oh my word, I wasn't sure I would survive it, but I knew I had to do it.
yeah.
But those are, but again, were we not to have our faith to fall back on,
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
I can't imagine the emptiness of people that walk around and, are humanists or whatever, and just don't see the connection of the power of God and the Holy Spirit. So
hmm, hmm. I mean, it's hard enough, even as
yes,
I'm always looking and trying to hear from God, it's hard
yes,
enough. I can't imagine how much more difficult it would be without a
Without
recognition of the Holy Spirit in my life. And I just thank God for that.
right, exactly. And do you sing? Do you enjoy singing?
You know, two things. I loved when I would read to my boys.
Mm-hmm.
If I would make a story into a song. I
Oh,
loved
how
singing
fun.
to them. I really did. I love singing at church. I'm not in
Right,
the choir. I'm
right.
not at all in the choir, but I may have the loudest voice in the
Oh,
pews
well, you'd be like
because
me.
I enjoy singing. I don't know that I'm any good at it, but I do love it.
Right, right, right. Well, and I, in fact, Barbara, my sister, and I talked about this even last Sunday, I guess. We talked in the afternoon, and I said, well, I went to early church, and I said, the music was so worshipful. And we both agreed that is the way we worship the best, is through the music, or at least
Mhm.
deeply worship, just by praising God through the music. So anyway, singing
That's wonderful. You know,
music.
in our time left, I always want to get advice from our SoundStory family because you are now a member of the family. Get advice, but before I do that, we were talking about how education has changed, how parenting has changed, and how you feel a level of sorrow and for people today, parents today,
Right,
and young people today
right.
because of the internet. You've mentioned the word that it grieves.
Mhm,
Grieves your spirit.
mhm,
I would love for you to give us an encouraging word as you talk about how different things are today for families, for husbands and wives and parents. It is a different time.
mhm. That is a deep question. Again, I guess I go back to hold true to what your values were from the get-go and try to reignite those values of goodness. And I know just in writing a birthday card to my grandson today, who's going to be 16, I said, I just continue to be the resource you need to develop the most is loyalty and kindness and faith.
Mm.
And you need to live that out in your life and in your daily decisions. And particularly as you look at the world that will teach you different things and friends who will want to lead you in different places, go back to who you were and then who you are in the eyes of God, and hold true to that. And that's the way I feel. My younger family, and those little boys are just turned 7 in May, and one will be 9 in the end of September. They don't go to church regularly, and so I pray for them constantly. They do go to Holy Redeemer as a school, so they have faith,
Mhm.
taught in their school. And for that, I'm very grateful. And their parents are fabulous parents. I mean, they are so clear about discipline and what you do and what you don't do, and what your manners are and what they aren't. So, so I know they are great little boys. I want them to have the role modeling that I was gifted to have of a faith community around them. And so that's what I guess I would say. And I know
Mhm.
a lot of the world would not agree with that. Um, and yet, I believe in the word of God and the truth, and that is the truth. And I hope that I can be a witness of that to my family and to my children and grandchildren.
Well, it would be wonderful to always, try to meet the world, not where it is, but where I'd like it to be. And when you say
Right.
loyalty, kindness, and faith,
Mhm.
I know people struggle because what they've seen that even some parts of the church become,
Right. Oh, for
there's
sure.
such a
Debatable.
that
Right.
makes it even more difficult for the
Oh,
message that we
well, and
try to give.
it gives them an
Yeah,
excuse to not
yes, it does.
participate. And you shouldn't cave into that. You should cave into the standards that we know were supposed to be there, and realize that yes, it's happened, it's grievous, but percentage wise, how great is it? And you look at all of the great priests, and again, I was raised an evangelical Christian, but I think particularly in the Catholic scandal, and all of how many hundreds and thousands of priests were absolutely fabulous. And there were maybe 500, 1,000 who weren't or something. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't justify any of it, but I don't think we should use that as an excuse to not participate in worship and seek to have a spiritual home for our family to grow up in and be a part of, because that's such a, and I've always said, being a friend and having friends takes work. And and I know, and I guess it's part of me being a leader. I instinctively try to pull people together, and just like a high school group of 7 of us go out for dinner, and and so I've just made a reservation for that today. So okay, the 23rd we're all going out for dinner,
Oh, how
but
lovely.
but people, you have to not worry about why don't I have friends, but cultivate friendship. And
Right. All
and
right.
and I know my boys are very, very good at cultivating friendship and valuing friendship. And I think that's invaluable, but it's especially invaluable as a woman, because I think we need reinforcement, female to female too.
Mhm.
Um,
I agree.
and so I would, my daughters-in-law don't have the plethora of friends that I've been able to have in my life, and I long for them to be able to. But again, you have to make an effort in order to. And both of them
Mhm.
work full time. They're absolutely fabulous people, and wouldn't trade them for anything in the world. But just that's a piece of their lives that I see, that I know they would probably like deeper friendships, but maybe again it's a time of life when their kids are these ages,
Right.
and one just leaving for college. So anyway, it is what it is. But I think that's another thing that sustains us in life and in a life of faith, is that if we cultivate friendship and know how to truly be kind and not judge people. That would be just a great weakness, is to judge people. You may not agree with what they're doing, but you don't need to judge them. So anyway,
Well, I appreciate that so much, and we have a it's not a saying, but a foundational principle at my church, and we call it rule number 10. And this is despite all the negative headlines, despite what some in leadership in various churches have done in an inappropriate and illegal sometimes way, that rule
right.
number 10 is God is still on the throne.
Amen. Yes.
Amen. Amen to that. And I'm so glad you brought up friendship, because that was going to be my last question. I
Uh,
promised you. We've talked about your life as a mother, and about your sons, and your wonderful marriage started just as mine did, on a blind
right,
date. I love that
right,
so much.
right.
But dude, it is a in a friendship way. To talk about friendship, you're going out with your girlfriends you've known forever.
Oh my
I
God.
did a study
Right,
a couple of years ago. God is a God of community,
right,
and we are to be in community with one another.
right.
And as I hear you talk about your faith journey, it made me think of friendships. And my baby sister is my friend as well. We are in community together. So please talk
Right.
about that, and help us to. Loneliness is an epidemic in this country, and
It
we
is.
do need one another.
Particularly so since COVID. But that maybe again, that's an excuse people have used. I don't know, but
Mm.
nevertheless, but like in going out to dinner on the 23rd, one of the people who'll be going out to dinner with me is, we've literally went to kindergarten together. I
Oh,
mean, and then we ended up going to college together and even being roommates. And then we're together in um, a, a little group of friends from college, and we've lost, one or two or whatever, but in reality, we cling to who we have, and so you have groups who you can really consider as your prayer partners too. And in life, we need prayer partners and prayer warriors. But friendship to me, And just even like moving into this condominium, I hosted a brunch probably a month or 2 months after we moved because I thought, well, I need to get to know these people.
Mm,
And so that's when I say it takes initiative and effort to be a friend and to cultivate friendship. But you'll never be disappointed. And it doesn't mean everybody has to be alike. We're very different in this condominium, but that has nothing to do with it. We're very loyal to each other and we enjoy each other. We get together every Saturday morning for coffee. So, I think sustaining relationships is critical for a happy life because I think
yes.
we need friendships outside of our families. And of course, there's everything beautiful about the core of family, but sometimes that doesn't work out as well either. I mean, and that's just different for different people. But in the meantime, we do need to have friends who will be there, just like my friend Barbie, who gave me this gift. And she's even said to me, okay, if you need it, you can live with us if you need to. So I'm like, oh, no. I'm going to be independent to the very end. But at any rate, and again, and if you can cultivate friendships of different ages, I think that's very wholesome too. I have, for me, it's right. I can't say that it's right for everybody, but I've put off going into a senior living place just because I want to see, I don't know, I want to see people of different ages around me and people.
It's enriching.
It is, it really, it truthfully is. And, of course, I have a church in Florida and a church up here, so I'm kind of split there. And I don't serve as much as I used to because I think I just did so many years of serving so hard that I'm a little bit tired of all of that, for which I obviously feel guilty, or I wouldn't be telling you that. So at any rate, but nevertheless, again, that a church is such a huge place to cultivate relationships and easily done as you volunteer, whatever that volunteer is,
Mhm.
holding boxes or whatever it is for whatever. There, and you just never know who the Lord has intended for you to make as a close friend. So anyway.
It's such a joy to talk to you and especially to hear about your faith walk and how it has sustained you. Thank you for the advice. And it's so wonderful to know that I have something in common, so many things
You're so
in
cute.
common with
Oh, Bill,
you.
you're so kind. Oh, thank you for your kindness. You're just very generous person in spirit, and I appreciate it. So thank you for this time.